Welcome to Common Man Cocktails. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. What I've been striving to do over the last, several months in my brain is come up with some home do-it-yourself solutions to common problems, such as the use of cocktail bitters in a cocktail. So what I wanted to do today was, I have a couple infusions that are working, that are in the works. There are three basically different ways that you can go about creating a cocktail bitter. There's the old school infusions where you let it sit in a jar, and I've got a couple jars upstairs for lemongrass and a raspberry bitter. The other way is you can do rapid infusions with an NO2 cartridge and like an easy whipper using the ISI products. The third way, and that's like a 5-minute but smaller batch. And you can get creative, but you're going to be burning through a lot of NO2 cartridges, usually 2 per. The other way you could go about it is doing a sous-vide method. The sous-vide method would be to put something in plastic bags, vacuum sealed, and let it cook under a controlled temperature. So with the sous-vide method, what we're going to do is we're going to create a cocktail recipe that I modified from a base bitter recipe I saw on ForkandStave.com, which is a coffee bitter. And I created theirs here. I used a different base. This was using the Knot, which is a high proof, the Knot, 100 proof Irish whiskey. So I have this already made. Then what I did is I said, let's do it the way that the recipe originally intended, which was a bourbon. Now you could create something that would complement these will complement too, but complement a Manhattan, which is usually a bourbon base, rye base, whatever your favorite whiskey is. We're going to use the bourbon this time, and I can compare it to this one. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I was running to go get the plastic bag. So this is where all the awesomeness is going to actually happen. What you're going to do is you're going to do a more rapid infusion in a 2-hour infusion, 122 degree controlled environment. This Nomiku Immersion Circulator is basically just moving the water around and keeping it at a constant temperature. The cool thing about this specific product, and they sent this to me to review, they have a program or a Wi-Fi enabled application that connects to your device called Tender. Not Tinder, Tender, where people could create their own recipes, and submit them in a social networking style atmosphere, or you can save your own. You can use their recipes and you can click go and it programs the temperatures and the times on your Nomiku to do the process for you. So you throw your ingredients in and you go. I didn't do that. I'm creating this on my own. It's a 2-hour time, so I could just set the timer for 2 hours, put all the ingredients in here, and then let it rest in there for those 2 hours, take it out, strain it, which will be the second phase of this video. The first phase, I'm going to go through what I'm creating. So, oh, by the way, since it is all Wi-Fi enabled and you have this cool little application, you can actually see when it's done. It sends you the alerts and everything, which is kind of neat. This is going to be our coffee base. So we've got ground coffee. Now there are 2 different ways you can measure this. I'm going to tell you what I did because I created it and it worked. Then I could tell you what you should probably do. So in the recipe online didn't really state was you're going to take 2 ounces of coffee, coarsely ground. Mine is actually K-cups that I cut open because all the coffees I had in the house that were coarsely ground were flavored coffees and I didn't want to go down that route. So I cut open 2 K-cups to get this. I have added in my modifier is some roasted cocoa nibs. So that's a cacao nibs rather. It's a cacao bean that's just been roasted and chopped up a little bit. I've got wild cherry, which one is it? Cherry bark. Yep, wild cherry bark. So I bought these at Mountain Rose Herbs. All the links below for all these products will be there. I've got a shopping list for you. And then cassia chips. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a recipe that contains 2 ounces of the coarse ground coffee beans, about 1/4 cup. It was measured as 1/4 cup. A half teaspoon of cassia chips, that's cinnamon chips. You could also just break up some cinnamon if you needed to. Another half teaspoon of the wild cherry bark, that's your bittering agent. And this is one of the more modest bittering agents. It's not going to be super bitter, it's not gentian, it's not aloe, it's a very graceful bitter. It's not going to be too intense. We're also going to do the half teaspoon of the cacao nibs. We're going to do 8 ounces of bourbon from the Wild Turkey 101 in this case. I like to use high proof bourbon for bitters because high proofage is good. More alcohol will suck in more of those flavors, and this is going to be a 2-hour process, so you want something that's high test that can suck those flavors out quickly. And then we're going to do a peel of one entire orange. So we'll peel this up, and then we'll be able to add this into that to give you some zesty orange nuances to your bitter. And I've had Ian taste these. He's like, oh, is there some orange in there? It's definitely, it's in there. It's like Prego. So the shopping list as such, you're going to need Wild Turkey 101. That's going to probably run you $23. It's $27 on Bevmo. If you're in New Hampshire, it's $23. The cacao nibs is, you could get a 4-ounce one of these. This is the 4 ounce. This is larger. This is 8. You can get a 4 ounce, and obviously when you buy more, the cost is more cost effective. But I just stuck 4 ounces for you guys. 4 ounces of cacao nibs is $4.50. 4 ounces of wild cherry bark, $3.50. $2.50 for 4 ounces of the cassia chips, ground coffee, whatever. $7.99 if you buy a 12-ounce bag of coffee is usually what I usually spend. I think I'm a coffee guy, so it's usually around my spend. I also got these cobalt blue Boston rounds. If you're wondering what these are called, this is a Boston round. The larger ones that you get for syrups and stuff that you might get through us, like White Whale or any of the products that are in those like fancy round bottles, that's Boston round. This is a 4-ounce Boston round, and it comes complete with the dropper, which is always nice when you're doing bitters. And that's $1.17 each. I bought 10 of them. Shipping was $12. The whole thing was $16, so it's $16 plus $12. It was not cheap, but they're really cool because you can reuse them if you need to, and you have enough to build your experimentation. If you want to get a label maker, you can get that on your own. And those were really... Oh, and the Nomiku. So the Nomiku Wi-Fi right now is on pre-order at Nomiku.com because they just sold them all out, and it's $199 for that. If you add up all the ingredients and the costs, you're going to find it's actually cost effective because you could use your sous vide for food, like most people probably do, or future bitter production, and you have basically your production facility. I just have it sitting on top of my burner from upstairs just to keep it off of just to keep the heat off the bar. I don't know if it's hot enough to cause any damage, but better safe than sorry. And that's really it. So what we're going to do is combine everything in the bag. You could vacuum seal it if you have vacuum seal bags, or you could just add the bag with the oxygen into the water. When it gets in the water bath, the water is going to push the oxygen out, and then it's going to close and create the seal. Boom, and you're done. So let's do that. I'll just add everything in here, and we'll go. While I cut this, there's a little bit on some measuring by weight and volume. If you're measuring your coffee and you start measuring it using a dry measure system, such as these little cups, and you take a 1/4 cup, then you put it onto an actual weighted scale for measuring a 1/4 cup, which is going to be 2 ounces, it's way off. The ounces, like almost half. And the reason why, and so I stuck with just doing it with these cups, but the biggest reason, you'll see this with sugars as well, is because of the small grains that are in there. There's actually half of that space is oxygen between the grains because they're all sitting on each other, but they're not packed in tight. So you either have to hit it and really lower it down to get it fully packed, or do it by weight. If you do it by weight, you're probably going to end up with a much stronger coffee flavor in your bitter, I presume, since I didn't do that, and these bitters I already made are already pretty strong. So if you want to stick to what I would suggest is do all your ingredients in one common method by weight. Even your Wild Turkey or whatever the bourbon you use, do it by weight, and that way you know you have a precise measure. Or do it however you feel like it, and if the product comes out tasting good, you're done. Who cares? The other thing I did here is I'm using an orange peel, and I'm going to slice these into 2-inch cubes. I'm going to take off any of this pith. The pith is super bitter, so while you're doing the infusion, you want to keep as little amount of pith in the back as possible. That way you don't get an additional bitter that doesn't have that nice juicy orange flesh, which I kind of compare to a Cointreau. Has a little bit of that orange flesh, so I kind of like that. And I like that in a bitter as well. Number 3. Okay, when you're done, you're going to end up with liquid in a bag, which is kind of silly. When you're doing this with steak, it's not that odd because it sits. Liquid moves around a little bit, so you really have this thing sloshing around, and it gets fun to have to filter it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my zip, and I'm going to leave just a little space in the corner, so when I add it into the water, which is at 122, I'll show you guys. Actually, I can probably just move this. I'll show you in a second. When I add this in here, and 122 degrees is not comfortable to put your hands in, but it also doesn't really cause a lot of bodily harm. So I just move it in here and get that oxygen to rise out, or the air to rise out. Close it, and when you pull it up, it's now vacuum sealed. But some of my coffee is still stuck in here, so what I typically do is just sit it so that it settles in there a little bit. And probably in an hour or so, I'll just lift the bag up, move it, jiggle it around, put it back in, and let it stay for the remaining hour. This, my friends, if you should, excuse the noise, you should be able to see the Nomiku display right here, and it has a dial turn, so that as you set everything, it's all based on the dial. And that is both cool and super frustrating at the same time. It's cool because I can set the temperature. It's cool because I can set a timer and I can roll it. The problem comes when I want to configure Wi-Fi. You need to use the roller to be able to understand, to be able to put in your Wi-Fi password. And if you have a complex Wi-Fi password like I do, you are rolling all over the place, getting angry with yourself. So if there was any criticism towards a Wi-Fi enabled device, it would be just that you have to do this, and if you have numbers in uppercase, lowercase, just scrolling all over the place. I don't really know if there's a really better system. I don't really know how many times you have to do it. If your Wi-Fi stays, then you only put your password in once unless you change your Wi-Fi around. That's the only critique that I have for the device. All right, we're gonna let this sit. Maybe I'll eat an orange while I wait, and in 2 hours we'll come back. We'll take it out. We're gonna extract it using. I'm gonna use cheesecloth. If you have coffee filters, you can go it that way. It does kind of fit the theme. And then from there, we get to taste. Let it cool off a little bit first. All right, so let's wait on that.
2 hours later.
Okay, folks, here you go. I've taken out the product. It's still sitting in the plastic bag, and what we're gonna do now is we're gonna filter it down. The water's reaching a slightly less crazy temperature. Once the 2 hour mark was up, I stopped it, got everything working, or unworking if you will, and just shut it down so it didn't continually circulate hot water. There's no need at this point. So you still have the product to take out. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put it into a jar, any jar you have, any type of container you want, to do the initial filter. If you want to filter it a couple times, you can. Bitters, especially homemade, especially small batch bitters like Scrappy's, Dillon's, they have particulates built, just part of the finished product. So if you do have any like actual small batch bitters, you'll find that they can have some stuff cling to the dropper, and that's all natural and all normal. We'll have the same thing in here. If you don't have a cheesecloth, this is what we're using for our cheesecloth. The cheesecloth is just kind of like a fairly, not super fine, but a meshed cloth. And you can always add additional layers to it to get it to be a little thicker. So it gives you a little bit more control. You can use a coffee filter. The coffee filters do get a little bit annoying after a while because they'll clog up a lot easier. Then with the cloth, the cool thing is you can kind of wring it out and get more of the infusions out. So this is the final product. If it's anything like the last one I did, I used the same amount of product, but it came out into a 4-ounce bottle. So my guess is there's going to be some loss here because the materials absorb the product, especially the bark, which will get some of the liquids stuck into it that you're not going to really easily be able to get out, and you just kind of deal with it. One of the fun things to try and do is to hold this cheesecloth without it sinking in there. You can always strap it down or use the lids that they come with to kind of twist it on a little bit. Now, if this was a traditional infusion, bitter infusion, what you typically do is you take this material, you would boil that down in like a half cup of water, and then take that and after the boil and pour it over into another sieve and drain that into your bitter. So you're adding a little bit of water to it to cut the alcohol down. And when you do that, you're able to take some of the remaining product infused in here, so your oak barks and everything that has liquid in it, and try and express even more, and then you're going to let that rest for a week. Right, so you're going to actually do 2 weeks of resting, then you're going to boil the hard materials that don't drip through the mesh, and then you're going to pour again into there and then let it sit for another week. That's more than you need to do for this style of recipe. This is a 2-hour infusion, so gain the benefits of it. One of the things I did want to mention, here's where we can squeeze out, which you can't really do with a coffee filter very well because it just breaks. One of the things I did want to mention is the sous vide process is a cooking process, yet because it's keeping everything sealed in the bag, you don't have the water boil off, which making a simple syrup could be a crucial change, which is why some people like the cold infusion versus the hot infusion, because you boil off some of that water. Even if it's a little bit, it's going to throw off the balance. In this, you don't lose that because it's always in this bag. At the same time, there are more delicate ingredients that are a little bit more susceptible to the cooking process. Rose petals, for instance. If you wanted to add a rose petal nuance, probably not to this, but to a more herbal, lighter bitter, you probably would add a couple days of just keeping the petals in there and letting those softer ingredients sit within your bitter before you finish it. So it's almost like a finishing process, like you could do for bourbons and stuff, where you're going to finish them in a cask. Let me just clean this up. At this point, we can now start to put this into the 4-ounce Boston round. Let's see how much of it is actually going to make it in. You may end up with more product, and if that's the case, you could just add another bitter, give one to your friends, which is probably a good process anyway. There is a little extra in here. I would say it's probably not a full amount that's left. I think we could still fit a little more in here. Let's squeeze it out, see if we can make a mess. You don't want to fully top it up because you need room for the dropper to fit in there, because it will push it up. So now you've got yourself your own personal coffee bitter. Looks just like everybody else's coffee bitter, except it's even more small batch, more handcrafted. And once you've mastered this process with the sous vide, you could go in later and create a new bitter. What I would personally do, and what I have done, is I have a bitter infusion kit that I've kind of been building, which is a box of just different barks and different flavor agents with the cacao nibs and the cinnamon, and so I use this for other things as well. And you can mix and match, and kind of using the same ratios, play with different spirits. Try perhaps a grain vodka or a grain alcohol, like I don't know, any really high moonshines, for instance, would be a good one to infuse in there, or some of the brandies, and use that as a base, or a blackstrap rum, and come up with a different style of bitter using the same 1/4 ounce to a half, or a half teaspoon of product, and generate something new and cool. So let's see what the difference is. This one's still a little bit warm, but that won't be too bad. And like I said, give some to, if you have any buddies that make classic cocktails, it makes a great gift, and you can give them away for, Christmas and holidays and birthdays. It's there's a nice bite, like dark roast coffee, and after it starts to fade, you get a little bit of that chocolate, which isn't found within this bitter. So this bitter is going to have, and they are still bitter. The other thing you could do, if you ever go to a tasting room, or you go to Tales of the Cocktail and somebody offers you to try their bitters, the first thing you want to do, not do what you're doing at home, is you take the dropper and you drop a little bit right between the thumb and your pointer finger, like that, where it can just rest, and then you lick it. It's a more appropriate way of doing it. That way you're not putting your mouth too close to their droppers, and you're not spreading anything. So you get a very striking dry bitter flavor. You get a pretty immense dark roast coffee that, as it tails away, you get that chocolate flavor. So it's definitely a neat idea. I have seen Manhattans no, Old Fashioned's done with chocolate bitters, like the Aztec chocolate bitters from Fee. This kind of gives it a different nuance. If you want to take it to a different direction, sticking with the same recipe, add in a little bit of hot pepper, habanero in there, or serrano, or I don't have, or get yourself a little bit of the Naga chili vodka and add a little dash of that as a tincture, just to be able to, a tincture being a concentrated flavor, to be able to concentrate a little bit of heat in there. Then you get your dark roasted chocolate and a little fiery chili flavor, which could, definitely spice up a lot of different drinks. Could be a Bloody Marys, could be a Manhattan, add a little bitters to that, or a little bit of to an Old Fashioned or a margarita, and play around with the flavors. So that, my friends, that's in a 2-hour span, creating your own craft cocktail bitter in a 4-ounce jar, which is probably going to last you, a dash. I would drain the entire dropper for when anything calls for a dash. That's probably going to last you years, unless you're hugely into your bitter, and it might last you months, but you can always make more. Also, you can check out the Nomiku at nomiku.com. Their Nomiku Wi-Fi is the newest release. They have another release prior to that as well. It is an actual Kickstarter program that launched and was successful, and it's always nice to hear about Kickstarter programs, companies that go from nothing to something huge that are making a difference in either cooking or cocktail bitters. That's what we're trying to do here, so it's nice to see somebody else already ahead of the game. That's it. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and share this with all your buddies. We're done. We're teaching you how to make bitters. It's just like ice sculpturing, but more fun because you get to break stuff. Worst case, if it doesn't come out right or you break one oddly, then just